Long overdue on calling out my own wrong take here, but suffice to say, I was wrong on Justin Fields and the Bears situation. I said I would revisit that, and here we are. Specifically, I am pointing out the inaccurate prediction where I suggested they should trade the number one overall pick this year to acquire players and draft capital. Now, I will maintain that the Bears could have gotten a massive return for trading back this year. That is a fact. But when it comes down to it, if you have the number one pick in a given year where you believe the top quarterback in the draft can change the course of your franchise, you are going to draft that player. This is a passing league, and without top quarterback play, you cannot win on a consistent basis. And you are certainly not going to make a deep playoff run. So in a league where half of the teams do not have quarterbacks you have any belief in, if you're holding the top pick, you have to get the quarterback you view as the franchise player if he is in that year's draft. And that is exactly what the Bears did. I believe Caleb Williams is going to come into the league and be a good player immediately. I'm not saying he is going to resemble Patrick Mahomes in his first season as a starter in 2018 or even CJ Stroud's production last season. I just think he is going to have a strong year and will likely be the offensive rookie of the year. Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels going 1-2 this year was assumed by the time we got to draft night, so I don't think there's any surprises there. Drake May as well. I think what we lose sight of when you start getting into that next group of guys is where they actually get drafted relative to what their draft value was. But you could look at J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix and argue those players were selected ahead of where they were originally projected. As an example, a lot of mock drafts had Nix going in the second round. He was taken 12th overall by the Broncos. If you go in the top half of the first round of the NFL draft, regardless of position, that is one hell of an accomplishment. And I have to acknowledge that. But with Caleb Williams specifically, and having had more time to think about it, I get why the Bears kept the pick and ultimately selected him. So now I'll play devil's advocate to my original take. If you are the Bears, you have never had elite quarterback play. Your most relevant players at the position are, Jim McMahon, Jay Cutler, Sid Luckman. You just won what could potentially be, depending how Williams plays, one of the best trades of all time. In that trade last year with Carolina, they basically got DJ Moore, and at a team-friendly number, by the way. They have since re-upped with DJ Moore. But you got DJ Moore and Caleb Williams for Bryce Young. And then there's also no guarantee the picks you would have acquired by trading this year's number one overall would have resulted in difference-making players. Just look at the 2019 Raiders with the Khalil Mack trade. Their 3 first-round picks that year, Clelin Ferrell, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Abram. None of those guys are even on the team anymore. Their best pick that year was actually Max Crosby, and that was in the 4th round. And then finally, next year's quarterback class is considered to be less than this year's. Now, I say that with somewhat of an eye roll, as we always seem to end up with every draft being quarterback heavy in the first round, regardless of what we're told it's going to look like. But I do believe that as it stands right now, none of these quarterbacks coming up in 2025 are better than Caleb Williams. So given the opportunity to draft him, especially when the pick comes via, again, just a complete fleecing of the Carolina Panthers, you cannot pass up that opportunity. The one aspect I am somewhat surprised about is the return of draft capital or lack thereof for trading Justin Fields. I thought he would return at least a third or a fourth rounder. Clearly I was wrong about that, just like I was wrong about suggesting the Bears should keep him. But what I think it signals is the Steelers are, one way or another, still going to be in decision-making mode on their quarterback 1 year from now. They signed Russell Wilson for basically no money. Remember, he will be getting paid the big money by the Broncos both this upcoming season and in 2025. And Fields is basically going to be playing on a 1-year deal for 2024, as neither the Bears nor the Steelers picked up his 5th-year option. So that leaves a scenario where if either of these guys plays well enough in 2024 to the point where the Steelers say, okay, this is our guy moving forward, they are going to have to pay one of them. If Russ looks remotely close to what he looked like in some of those Seattle years, I can guarantee you his camp is coming to the table saying, hey, Steelers, pay up. We don't care how much we're getting from Denver. You are the team currently getting the production. Cut the check. And on the other side of that, if for whatever reason Fields ends up playing a bulk of the games in 2024, if he looks like a top half quarterback, where does that leave you going into the 2025 season? With Russell Wilson, you could say, okay, we may not be able to pay or to only pay this guy $1 million, but we also don't need to give him, 40 to 50 million a year. But with Fields, you would essentially be in a position of having to either franchise tag him, which I think the Steelers would not want to do given how much the top quarterbacks make, or sign him to a longer-term deal. Now, I'm not saying it would be one of these $200 million quarterback extensions, but even if it was, similar to the Geno Smith deal a few years ago, adjusted for, inflation or growth in the salary cap, whatever you want to call it, you'd probably be looking at something like 3 years, 80 to 90 million with 60 guaranteed. And who knows, if you're Fields or his representation, you probably go to the table and say, Baker Mayfield's contract is below the starting point here because our guy adds a whole extra dimension with his legs and his ability to extend plays. Look, now that we've seen Justin Fields play a couple of preseason games, it sounds completely absurd to suggest the Steelers should have done anything in the way of guaranteeing him more money beyond 2024. But I would have expected to see some kind of hedge, maybe even something along the lines of what we saw the Packers do with Jordan Love going into the 2023 season, when they signed him to basically a 1-year extension that would have given him about a $13 million guarantee in 2025 plus incentives. Now, that's a moot point now, as they've signed Love to one of these mega extensions. And while Fields has not produced a good win-loss percentage during his first 3 seasons, his production through 3 seasons was light years ahead of what Jordan Love had done at the time that the Packers opted to give him the 1-year extension instead of picking up the 5th year. Now, the circumstances were different. Fields was the starter for Chicago for the better part of 3 seasons, where Jordan Love sat behind Aaron Rodgers. But I just think it would have been a strategic hedge for Pittsburgh to say, let's get this guy under team control for 1 more year at a small number for a quarterback, relatively speaking. And even if it was a complete disaster at quarterback, Fields is one of the better athletes in the NFL. You could use him in a variety of roles to extract value. So you would have had the benefit of, let's use 1 more low-cost year to evaluate this guy or have him contribute in other ways. The Steelers are now in a position of, if one of these guys plays well, you're going to either have to pay up in 2025 and beyond, or take your chances in the draft. And we saw what that looked like just a couple of years ago in another quote unquote weaker quarterback draft. The Steelers selected Kenny Pickett in 2022. He now plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. So it will be interesting to see how this ultimately plays out. But I want to get back to the Bears. One thing I won't do is avoid or just kind of skirt by, a take that just ended up being so completely wrong. And let's be real, I thought I had that one down. The one thing I did not see coming was just how much skill position talent the Bears would add in the offseason. Obviously, Caleb Williams is the centerpiece, but it would be fair to say the Bears added the most of any team in terms of offensive firepower. I mean, for the Chicago Bears, they have never in franchise history had an offseason like this in which they upgraded the offensive side of the ball to such a significant extent. Draft Caleb Williams number 1 overall. Draft Rome Odunze. Sign DeAndre Swift. Trade for Keenan Allen. Extend DJ Moore. So when I said they would be better off keeping Justin Fields and using the number 1 pick to acquire talent, I completely underestimated their ability to stack that talent so quickly. Again, Ryan Poles, that was a hell of a job. Very savvy. I'm going to make a prediction, which is rich, considering I've spent this episode telling you how wrong a prediction, mine was previously. But I believe Ryan Poles is getting, should it not work out with Eberflus, Poles is getting at least one more coaching hire. This guy has shown the ability to maximize value and understand where the opportunities are. Now, all that said, I think the expectations for the Bears have gotten a little bit out of hand. I view this 2024 Bears team as a potential playoff team, which obviously would be a big upgrade over these last few years, that's for sure. But I don't see the justifications on the extreme ends in either direction. You have some people who think the Bears are going to the NFC Championship. Others are saying, well, it's the Bears. There's no positive outcomes on the horizon. Caleb Williams is suddenly going to lose all of his skills because if you are drafted by Chicago, you are going to be cursed. I don't see it like that. I believe this Bears team goes 9-8, maybe 10-7, and may get into the NFC playoffs. It's hard to see them going beyond that first round. I mean, if they do, I think that goes down as the absolute best, realistic expectation of what this team could do in 2024. And to me, putting an expectation on them to be anything more than that, it's just out of touch. So while this is one hell of an offensive upgrade, especially for Chicago, I just think we have to be reasonable. The Bears have more than enough offensive talent to be competitive. The question is, can they turn that into a top 7 in the NFC? I say they can. We'll see. Thank you for listening.